So, if you are 40 years old, one calendar year represents just about 2.5% of your total life. But, I mean, when you were 10, a single year was 10% of your entire existence.
Right. Yeah.
So just mathematically speaking, your life is accelerating. But what we're looking at today is how neurologically the smartphone in your pocket might actually be like deleting your lifespan from your own memory.
It is a totally jarring realization when you put it that way. But I mean, the science backing up that exact phenomenon is just incredibly robust.
Yeah.
We aren't just talking about, a vague feeling of getting older. We are talking about the actual biological mechanics of how the human brain encodes duration.
Exactly. And I read through the giant stack of sources we pulled for this deep dive, and I have to admit, it really messed with my head a little bit.
I completely agree.
Yeah, because we were looking at cognitive neuroscience research on time perception, psychological studies out of Stanford University on the emotion of awe, and even practical frameworks like Cal Newport's concept of slow productivity.
Right.
So our mission today, for you listening, is to figure out why time seems to just hit the fast forward button the older we get.
Yeah.
And, whether we actually have the neurological hardware to hit the brakes.
And we should probably clarify up front that this isn't going to be like a guilt trip about screen time
Oh, definitely not.
or just some generic lecture on being too busy. The goal here is to unpack the literal machinery of time perception. We want to look at how we can, manipulate our own psychology to make our days feel longer.
Richer.
Exactly. Richer and more expansive. We are basically trying to cure what modern sociologists are now calling time famine.
Time famine. Yeah, that term is intense. But I want to start with a concept from the psychology writer Claudia Hammond, because I found it absolutely fascinating. She calls it the holiday paradox.
Yes, the holiday paradox. It's such a great framing.
I think everyone has experienced this, but actually understanding the machinery behind it really sets the stage for everything else. Like, I know when I take a trip, let's say a 2-week vacation somewhere I've never been, like navigating the subway in Tokyo.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. That's a lot of sensory input.
Right. And while I'm there, the days just fly by. I'm not looking at a clock. But then, when I get back to my desk a week later, it feels like I was gone for 6 months.
Yeah, and that gets right to the heart of how our brains process reality. Hammond points out that we actually have two very different ways of experiencing time.
Okay.
There's perspective time, which is how we feel time passing in the present moment, and then retrospective time.
Which is how we judge a duration looking backward.
Precisely. So on that Tokyo trip, you are constantly bombarded with novel stimuli. I mean, you have to figure out a new transit system, interpret a different language, taste completely unfamiliar spices.
Navigate strange streets, yeah.
Exactly. The cognitive load is immense, but in a very engaging way.
So basically, in the present moment, because my brain is running at like maximum processing capacity just to handle the environment, I'm not dedicating any mental resources to tracking the passage of time.
Right.
The clock just vanishes.
It vanishes. But the paradox kicks in when you return home. Because as a biological machine, the brain is just ruthlessly efficient.
How so?
Well, it only wants to spend energy storing information that might be useful later. So when you are living your normal daily routine, waking up at the same time, driving the exact same route, staring at the same inbox, your brain recognizes the pattern.
Oh, I see.
It says, I already have this data. And so it essentially just stops recording. It skips over the mundane to save hard drive space.
That is wild. So the routine just like overwrites the previous day's file.
Yes, exactly like that. But on vacation, every single day is this massive deluge of new data that absolutely must be recorded.
Right.
So when you sit at your desk a week later and try to gauge how long you were gone, your brain doesn't consult a biological clock. It consults its memory banks. It looks at the sheer volume of dense, high-resolution memories you formed in Tokyo, and it concludes, wow, look at all this data. This must have taken a very long time.
That makes so much sense.
Time perception in hindsight is literally entirely a function of memory density.
Which perfectly explains why childhood feels like an absolute eternity. Because being a kid is basically one long, uninterrupted string of novel experiences.
You're learning the rules of the world from scratch.
Exactly. And I remember the sources talking about the nostalgia era, or the reminiscence bump.
Yes, the reminiscence bump. It's a huge phenomenon in cognitive psychology. When researchers ask older adults to recall their lives, there is this massive overrepresentation of memories from the ages of roughly 15 to 25.
That makes a lot of sense. That's the era of massive firsts.
Oh, absolutely.
Your first real heartbreak, learning how to drive, moving into a dorm, your first terribly cramped apartment. I mean, everything is so emotionally charged and highly novel.
Exactly. The brain is encoding data at an astonishing rate during that specific decade. But then, as we settle into the predictable rhythms of mid-adulthood, the same mortgage, the same career track, the same weekend chores,
The novelty just drops off a cliff.
it drops off a cliff. And here is the brutal neurological reality. When novelty drops, memory formation drops. And when memory formation drops, your perception of your own past physically shrinks.
Okay, let me make sure I'm really grasping the biology of this.
Mm.
Because the sources mention two specific areas of the brain that govern this sort of dual timeline thing.
Right, the insula and the hippocampus.
Yeah, Mark Whitman's research. He details how the insular cortex and the interoceptive system govern present time, while the hippocampus handles retrospective time.
That's right.
So what is the interoceptive system actually doing when I'm, say, just sitting in a super boring meeting?
So interoception is your brain's perception of your internal physical state. It's how you subconsciously track your heartbeat, your breathing, your digestion, even your body temperature.
Okay.
Whitman's research suggests that when we aren't distracted by external novelty like in that really boring meeting, our attention turns inward to these steady, rhythmic bodily functions.
Oh, I hate that feeling.
Yeah, the insular cortex processes these internal signals, and they act like a metronome. You become acutely aware of every single second ticking by, which makes the present moment feel agonizingly slow.
But then, looking backward, the hippocampus takes over.
Right. The hippocampus is the critical structure for encoding episodic memory. If the insular cortex is the metronome of the present, the hippocampus is the archivist of the past.
And there's a study on this, right?
Yes. To prove this, researchers at Sapienza University studied patients with Alzheimer's disease who had specific atrophy in the hippocampus.
What did the study actually look like? I mean, how do you even test someone's internal clock?
So they had the patients undergo a testing session, and afterward, they asked them to retrospectively estimate how much time the session had actually taken.
And what happened?
The patients with hippocampal damage performed significantly worse than the healthy controls. Because their brains were struggling to lay down the episodic memory markers of the session, they basically had no internal ruler to measure the past.
Yeah.
Without those memory building blocks, their sense of past duration was fundamentally broken.
So the takeaway here is kind of terrifying, honestly. Because if routine and predictability shrink our memories, then a highly optimized, perfectly routine life is basically a fast track to a completely unmemorable existence.
Yes.
We think we're being so efficient, but we're literally just deleting the footage of our own lives.
Which forces us to look at the tools we use to achieve that efficiency. Because if routine overwrites our memory, we really have to consider what happens when we introduce a device into our daily lives that provides thousands of tiny, identical, repetitive routines every single day.
The smartphone.
The smartphone.
This brings us to that concept of time famine. I read that term in the sources, and I felt a physical reaction to it.
It's very relatable.
It really is. It describes this chronic, high-level stress state where you perpetually feel like you have too much to do and just not enough time to do it. The sources even cite a poll showing nearly half of all Americans live in this state constantly.
Right, and it degrades sleep, it ruins decision-making, and it keeps the nervous system on this high alert state.
We often turn to our phones to, supposedly save time or fill in the gaps we perceive as dead time, like waiting for a bus or standing in line for coffee.
But Haley McGee, she's a coach and writer who synthesizes a lot of this research. She argues that chronic phone use is actually a primary driver of this famine.
Yes, she outlines 4 distinct ways that this behavior destroys our sense of time and meaning. Let's walk through those, because the first one hit me really hard.
Okay, let's do it.
She points out that chronic phone use prevents deep memory formation. And if we just establish that memory density equals a long feeling life, how exactly is the phone disrupting that? Is it just distraction?
It's actually worse than simple distraction. It is a mechanical interruption of the brain's recording process.
Really?
Yeah. To move an experience from short-term working memory into long-term storage in the hippocampus, the brain requires a few continuous seconds of unbroken, sustained attention.
Right.
It literally needs a moment to gather the sensory details, bind them together, and file them away.
So when I'm watching a movie with my family, but I keep reflexively glancing down at a group chat every 2 minutes.
You are constantly shattering that necessary continuity. Your brain never gets the sustained focus required to build a high-resolution memory of a movie or the conversation or even just the feeling in the room.
Wow.
The memories you do manage to form are incredibly fragmented and shallow. And shallow memories do not expand our perception of time.
That flows right into her second point, which is about the fragmentation of time itself.
Yeah.
She introduces this contrast between thick time and thin time.
That is a crucial distinction. Thick time is that glorious state of deep absorption. You are fully present whether you're reading a profound book, painting, or just having a deep philosophical debate with a friend.
The meaning emerges because your attention is sustained.
Exactly.
And thin time.
Thin time is the result of constant task switching. Every single time you look away from your environment to check a notification, your brain undergoes a cognitive reset.
A reset.
Yeah, it has to dump its working memory and load up the new context of the email or the social media feed. When you do this hundreds of times a day, your internal timeline becomes jagged and rushed.
Yeah, I totally get that.
You end up existing in a state of perpetual forward motion, just skimming across the surface of your life without ever diving in.
I know that exact feeling.
Ah!
It's the physical sensation of a doom-scrolling binge. I can sit on the couch and scroll through short-form video for 45 minutes. I look up, the time has literally vanished, and my brain feels like static.
Yes.
I have no memory of what I actually consumed.
Yeah.
But compare that to spending 45 minutes chopping vegetables, smelling the garlic, and cooking a meal. That physical 45 minutes has weight. It feels substantial.
And that contrast leads perfectly to McGee's third and fourth points. Chronic phone use narrows our emotional landscape. Well, apps are designed to deliver cheap, rapid-fire novelty. The brain gets addicted to these tiny dopamine hits, which blunts your sensitivity to more complex, demanding emotional states like wonder, grief, or deep inspiration.
You trade a full-color emotional palette for black and white.
Exactly. And because we're constantly seeking that next tiny hit, we never integrate our experiences. That was her final point.
Right.
We keep our nervous system so chronically activated, always bracing for the next ping, that we never metabolize what we've actually learned into actual wisdom or insight.
The irony is profound. We use the screens to fill the time, but the biological reality of task switching starves the hippocampus of the memories needed to make that time feel meaningful.
It's a vicious cycle.
But, I need to challenge this a bit, though. Let's look at the mechanics of the holiday paradox we discussed earlier.
Okay.
The core rule was that novelty expands time because the brain has to process new data. But if I open a social media app, I'm looking at a literal fire hose of novelty. Hundreds of new ideas, new faces, new locations, new jokes, all delivered in a span of 10 minutes. So, by the logic of the memory effect, shouldn't a TikTok binge make my day feel incredibly long? Why does digital novelty shrink time while a trip to Tokyo expands it?
That is the perfect question, and it really reveals the critical flaw in how we think about novelty. It's not just about raw data input. It comes back to the interoceptive system, the body.
Oh, interesting.
Deep novelty, the kind that actually expands time, is fully embodied. When you are lost in Tokyo, you are engaging your entire sensorium.
Right.
You are feeling the humidity, smelling the street food, physically pivoting your body to look at signs, feeling the anxiety of being lost and the sudden relief of finding the train station.
It's an entire physiological event.
Yes. Your brain is receiving holistic data from your physical form, which signals, hey, this is a significant complex event. Record this deeply.
Okay, I see.
But when you are doom scrolling, you are physically disembodied. You are sitting completely still, staring at a two-dimensional plane. The novelty is purely visual and highly shallow.
Right, I'm not moving at all.
It requires zero physical or emotional accommodation. And because the body isn't engaged, the brain doesn't flag the data as meaningful. It just lets it wash over you and disappear.
So, data without physical context is basically junk food for the brain.
That's a great way to put it.
And if shallow digital novelty is the junk food causing our time famine, we really need to know what the nutritional equivalent of a hearty meal is. Like what actually feeds our perception of time.
And this brings us to what I found to be the most surprising part of the research stack.
Yes, the Stanford University studies on the emotion of awe. This research fundamentally shifts the paradigm of time management.
It really does. Melanie Redd, Kathleen Bowes, and Jennifer Aker at Stanford wanted to investigate whether specific emotions could alter our subjective experience of time availability.
So when we talk about awe in a clinical scientific setting, what does that actually mean? Because we use that word casually all the time, like, that pizza was awesome, but I seriously doubt Stanford is measuring reactions to pepperoni.
No, Definitely not. In psychological research, awe has a very specific two-part definition. First, it requires what they call perceptual vastness.
Okay.
You have to encounter something that is so immense, either in physical size, conceptual scope, or complexity, that it completely overwhelms your current frame of reference.
Like staring up at the Milky Way on a perfectly clear night in the desert, or standing at the base of a giant redwood tree.
Exactly. And the second requirement is a need for accommodation.
Meaning?
The experience must be so vast that it literally forces your brain to update its mental models of the world just to make sense of what it is perceiving. It shatters your standard operating procedure.
Okay, so how did the researchers test this in a lab? I mean, you can't just teleport test subjects to the Grand Canyon.
True. So they designed 3 incredibly clever experiments. In the first one, they started by deliberately inducing time famine.
Oh, wow. How?
They had participants unscramble sentences that were heavily loaded with time anxiety words. Words related to rushing, being late, and tight deadlines.
So they basically primed them to feel stressed and hurried.
Yes. Then they split the participants into 2 groups. One group was shown a 60-second television commercial designed to evoke happiness. It featured upbeat music, people smiling, confetti, and a parade.
Okay.
The other group was shown a 60-second commercial designed to evoke awe. It featured vast, sweeping imagery of waterfalls, whales breaching, and astronauts floating in space.
And what was the actual result?
After just that 60-second exposure, the participants who watched the awe-inducing video reported feeling that they had vastly more time available in their day than the group that watched the happy video.
Are you serious?
Yeah, the feeling of time famine was significantly neutralized.
Just from a 1-minute video of a waterfall. That implies our sense of time scarcity isn't entirely objective. It's highly malleable based on what we are looking at.
Absolutely.
Well, what did the second experiment test?
Experiment 2 took it a step further. Instead of videos, they had participants write about a personal memory where they experienced either profound awe or profound happiness. After the writing exercise, they measured the participants' levels of impatience, and then they offered them a choice. Would you prefer to volunteer your time to a charity, or would you prefer to donate money to a charity?
Oh, I feel like I know where this is going based on the first experiment.
Well, recalling an awe-inducing memory significantly reduced impatience. But the critical finding was the charity choice. The awe group was significantly more willing to volunteer their time.
But not their money.
Exactly. They were not more willing to donate money compared to the happy group.
Oh, that's a massive distinction. So awe didn't just make them universally more generous or better people overall. It specifically altered their perception of temporal wealth.
Right.
They felt rich in time, so they were willing to give time away.
It was a purely temporal intervention. And the third experiment solidified this even more. Participants read one of 2 stories. The awe-inducing story described ascending the Eiffel Tower and looking out over the vast, intricate grid of Paris.
Okay, and the other one?
The control story described ascending a plain, unnamed tower and looking at an unremarkable, flat landscape.
Sounds incredibly boring.
Very boring. Afterward, they were asked to choose a reward, an experiential good, like tickets to a Broadway show or a really nice dinner, or a material good, like a watch or a jacket.
Let me guess. The awe group chose the experiences.
Overwhelmingly. Because awe expanded their perception of time, they strongly preferred experiential rewards, which inherently require an investment of time to enjoy over physical objects. Furthermore, the awe group reported a direct, measurable boost in their momentary life satisfaction.
Wow. This raises a massive question about the mechanics of our brains, though. Like, why does a feeling of vastness change the clock in our heads? What is awe actually doing to the cognitive machinery?
The researchers point to 2 prevailing psychological theories to explain this. The first is the extended now theory.
Extended now.
Yes. This proposes that awe acts as an incredibly powerful anchor for our attention. When you see something mind-bendingly vast, you cannot simultaneously worry about your grocery list or replay some dumb comment you made in a meeting yesterday.
That makes sense.
Awe violently and beautifully yanks you into the present moment. And by focusing entirely on what is unfolding right now, the sensation of the present is physically elongated.
And the second theory?
The socio-emotional selectivity theory.
Oh.
This one is fascinating from an evolutionary perspective.
Oh, I love evolutionary psychology.
It suggests that when we encounter vastness, the brain receives a clear signal that there is profound new knowledge to acquire about the world. And to process new knowledge, the brain requires time.
Ah, I see.
So to facilitate this vital learning, the brain essentially tricks the conscious mind into feeling that time is expansive, reducing panic, and allowing for deep observation.
I think about how many productivity apps I have on my phone. Pomodoro timers, calendar blockers, task managers. We treat time management like a logistics problem. But this Stanford research implies that the ultimate time management tool is actually an emotion.
Exactly. And it suggests a radical reframing of modern burnout. I mean, if a 60-second video of space can alter decision-making and reduce impatience, how much of our chronic stress and time famine is actually just an acute awe deficiency?
That is a profound thought. We live in these highly curated, predictable environments, totally starved of vastness.
We really do.
But it leads to a very practical problem. I can't just hop on a plane to the Grand Canyon every time my inbox gets overflowing on a random Tuesday.
No, you can't.
So how do we manually manufacture this sense of thick time in the middle of an ordinary, mundane week? We need micro-strategies.
And thankfully, the sources provide 3 distinct scalable approaches for rewiring our days to stretch our perception of time.
Which are?
Grounding techniques, flow states, and the cognitive shift of romanticizing your life.
Let's start with grounding, because this connects perfectly back to the interoceptive system you explained earlier. The sources specifically mention the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. I've heard therapists recommend this for panic attacks. But how does it work as a time dilation tool?
It works because it forces you to consciously hijack the sensory pathways that govern present moment time perception.
Okay.
When you are stressed about the future, you are living in thin time. The 5-4-3-2-1 technique forces you to pause and out loud, or just mentally, identify 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste.
It's basically an enforced physical reboot.
Exactly.
One of the sources, A Piece from Helping Minds, uses cooking as an example.
It's a fantastic example of tactile grounding. Imagine you are making dinner after a really stressful day. Yeah. Usually your mind is racing, replaying a tense email exchange. You are physically chopping an onion, but mentally you are nowhere near the kitchen.
Right, and that time is going to vanish from your memory.
Yes. But if you apply grounding, you force your attention onto the vivid purple of the onion, the heavy, balanced weight of the chef's knife in your hand, the sharp, acidic smell hitting your nose, the sound of the oil sizzling in the pan.
So by anchoring your awareness to the physical senses, you are signaling to the insula and the hippocampus, I am here, this is happening, record this.
Right. You are actively creating a pocket of thick time. You pull yourself out of the abstract future and ground yourself in the concrete present.
I love that.
And the second strategy, flow states, takes this deep engagement to an even higher cognitive level.
Flow is a term coined by the psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, right? I think people often confuse flow with just relaxing, like binge watching a show. But that's not what he meant at all, is it?
Not at all. Passive leisure is the exact opposite of flow. Csikszentmihalyi defined flow as a state of deep, joyful, autotelic absorption. Meaning, the activity is rewarding in and of itself. When you are in flow, your sense of self-consciousness dwindles and your sense of time distorts. It feels effortless in the moment, but rich in retrospect.
So what are the actual requirements to trigger a flow state? Because I can't just decide to be in flow while I'm filling out a tax form.
No, there are specific conditions. First, the activity must have clear goals and provide immediate feedback.
Okay.
Second, and most importantly, there must be a delicate balance between the challenge of the task and your current skill level. If the challenge is too low, you get bored. If the challenge is too high, you get anxious. Flow exists right on the knife's edge where your skills are fully stretched but capable.
And the third requirement?
Undivided attention.
Got it. Yeah. The sources list some great everyday examples of this, like doing a complex yoga sequence where you really have to focus on your balance, or going for a long, grueling swim.
Right.
Gardening where you're visualizing the layout and working the soil. Even something like writing poetry or hyper-organizing a chaotic closet.
The common thread there is active, productive engagement that synchronizes the mind and body. Because you are highly engaged and constantly adapting to micro-challenges, your hippocampus is aggressively encoding the experience.
So when you look back on a Saturday afternoon spent in a flow state in your garden, it feels incredibly long and deeply satisfying.
Exactly. It acts as a powerful counterweight to time famine.
Okay, the third tactic is one that I was initially highly skeptical of. It's the concept of romanticizing your life.
I know, it sounds a bit cliché.
Right. The sources quote content creators like Brianna Schubert and Ashley Kipps. And I have to be honest, when I see this on social media, it usually just looks like someone buying an $8 latte and taking a highly edited aesthetic photo of a book they clearly aren't actually reading. It feels incredibly performative.
It is very easy to dismiss it as a superficial internet trend, for sure. But if we look past the social media aesthetic, the core psychological principle is actually very sound.
How so?
Romanticizing your life is a cognitive reappraisal strategy. It is the intentional choice to elevate and acknowledge the simple, mundane joys of existence, rather than viewing them as just obstacles to get through.
You know, the example Ashley Kipps gives actually changed my mind on this. She talks about eating dinner. Eating is a biological chore you have to do every single night.
Right.
It's so easy to just eat a sandwich over the sink while looking at your phone. But she suggests turning off the harsh overhead lights, lighting a single candle, and putting the food on a real plate. You haven't changed the food, but you have transformed the cognitive framework from refueling to experiencing.
And we can tie this directly back to the neuroscience of memory density we discussed earlier. We know that emotion acts as a superglue for memory formation.
Oh, interesting.
When you add good music to the chore of doing the dishes, or you light a candle for a weeknight dinner, you are injecting a subtle emotional context like playfulness, gratitude, or peace into a routine event.
I see what you're saying. If routine overwrites the brain's hard drive, romanticizing is like applying a high-definition 4K filter to your own vision.
Yes.
You are taking a standard definition chore, like doing the laundry, upscaling the sensory and emotional input, and thereby tricking your brain into recording the footage instead of deleting it as junk data.
Precisely. Grounding forces the physical awareness. Flow creates the deep cognitive engagement. And romanticizing adds the emotional superglue. Together, these three micro-strategies allow you to manually manufacture thick time out of thin air.
I absolutely love that.
Yeah.
But I want to zoom out now because I think we have to address the macro problem.
Okay.
It is wonderful to light a candle at dinner or practice 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 while I'm cooking, but how does that help me when I log onto my computer at 8 in the morning on a Monday and get crushed by an avalanche of corporate demands? We need a strategy to save our careers and our broader life trajectory from the modern cult of busyness.
For the macro scale, the sources point to the framework developed by Cal Newport, the computer science professor who wrote Deep Work. He calls it slow productivity.
Productivity.
Yes, and it's fundamentally a rejection of the modern workplace's default mode, which he identifies as pseudo-productivity.
Pseudo-productivity.
Mm-hmm.
Let me guess. Measuring how much work someone is doing by how fast they reply to a Slack message.
Exactly. It's the use of visible busyness, attending back-to-back meetings, firing off emails at 10 p.m., maintaining a hyper-responsive digital presence as a proxy for actual meaningful output.
It looks frantic and productive, but it usually produces very little of lasting value.
Right, it's the corporate equivalent of thin time. Slow productivity offers a completely different paradigm built on a few core principles.
The first principle Newport argues for is do fewer things, which, I mean, sounds like a dream, but what does he practically mean? Is he just telling people to slack off?
Not at all. He's talking about the cognitive limit of parallel processing. In a typical knowledge work job, people carry 10 or 15 active priorities at once. They bounce between drafting a report, answering a client email, and preparing a slide deck.
Yeah, that's a normal Tuesday for most people.
But every bounce incurs a task switching penalty. Your brain takes time and energy to load the new context, leaving a residue of attention on the old task. Newport advocates for aggressive sequential focus.
Meaning, finish one meaningful project completely before giving yourself permission to start the next one.
Yes. When you reduce the number of active projects, you eliminate the cognitive friction of switching, which ironically allows you to complete those projects at a much higher standard and in less total time.
That flows naturally into his second principle, which is to work at a natural pace. I think we forget that the 40-hour, perfectly consistent work week is an invention of the Industrial Revolution. It was designed for assembly line machines, not human brains.
Exactly. Newport suggests that knowledge workers should embrace seasonality. Human biology requires rhythms. We are capable of incredibly intense, deep, focused work, but that intensity must be followed by periods of slower, administrative recovery work.
Rejecting the culture of permanent manufactured urgency is essential for long-term endurance.
It really is.
And if you do fewer things at a natural pace, you arrive at his third principle. Obsess over quality.
Ultimately, excellent work is what solves actual problems, builds trust with clients, and advances a career. But true quality is impossible when your attention is fractured into 100 pieces.
Right.
Quality requires the patience to enter a flow state, the time to review and revise, and the mental space to think deeply.
Which brings us to the final principle, the one that I think terrifies people the most. In order to do fewer things, work at a natural pace, and obsess over quality, you have to set boundaries. You have to protect your attention.
If you don't defend your time, it will automatically be cannibalized by other people's urgencies. Saying no or renegotiating arbitrary deadlines is not a sign of laziness or a lack of team spirit.
No, it's not.
It is the professional requirement for protecting your capacity to deliver the high-quality work you were actually hired to do.
I see how this connects to the broader slow living movement mentioned in the sources.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that movement actually started in Italy in the 1980s. A guy named Carlo Petrini started the slow food movement in Rome, specifically to protest the opening of a fast food restaurant near the Spanish Steps.
Yes, the slow food movement was about reclaiming the dignity of local, traditional cooking against the homogenization of fast food. It gave us the SLOW acronym: sustainable, local, organic, whole.
And we can map that exact acronym onto our careers. We need sustainable pacing to avoid burnout, a localized focus on the specific task in front of us, organic growth of our actual skills rather than just learning a new software shortcut, and whole, deep projects rather than highly processed, fragmented microtasks.
The alignment with the neuroscience of time perception is just perfect. When we embrace slow productivity, when we immerse ourselves deeply in one high-quality project, we are generating the robust, complex memories that make our professional lives feel substantial and fulfilling.
Frantic busyness just leaves you exhausted at the end of a forgotten year.
Exactly.
Okay, I love the philosophy, but I have to play devil's advocate for the listener right now, because it is very easy for Cal Newport, a best-selling author and tenured professor who controls his own time, to write a book telling people to do fewer things.
True.
But what if you are a mid-level employee at a marketing firm? What if you have a manager who actively demands that you respond to emails within 5 minutes and who just assigned you 3 new projects on top of the 4 you already have? How on earth do you apply slow productivity when you don't control the thermostat of your own career?
That is the most critical hurdle,
Yeah.
and it's a highly valid concern. You cannot just walk into your manager's office and announce, hey, I'm practicing slow productivity, so I won't be doing these reports.
Yeah, that'll get you fired pretty fast.
The strategy relies on managing what we call micro boundaries and fundamentally changing how you communicate your capacity.
What does that look like in practice? Let's role play that. My boss comes to my desk and drops a massive new initiative on my plate.
The mistake most people make is either quietly accepting it and burning out or bluntly refusing it. The slow productivity approach is to make your invisible workload hyper-visible.
Okay.
You say, I would love to take the lead on this new initiative. Right now, my top priorities are delivering the Q3 analysis and finalizing the client deck by Thursday. To give this new initiative the deep focus it requires, I will need to pause the client deck until next week. Which of these 3 projects would you prefer I prioritize for delivery first?
Oh, that's brilliant. You aren't saying no. You are agreeing to do the work, but you are forcing the manager to confront the reality of the timeline. You are putting the burden of prioritization back on their shoulders while rigidly protecting your sequential focus.
Exactly. You are communicating that you care deeply about the quality of the output, and you are educating your manager that quality requires a realistic runway.
Right.
It might feel uncomfortable the first few times, but here is the long-term payoff. When you protect your focus, you actually deliver excellent work. Over time, you build immense professional capital. You become known in the organization as the person who produces incredibly reliable, high-tier work, rather than just the person who replies to Slack the fastest.
And that reputation eventually buys you the autonomy to dictate your own pace.
Yes.
It's a trade-off. You are trading the superficial illusion of speed for the undeniable reality of impact. Just imagine a corporate culture where productivity isn't measured by the little green active dot on your messaging app, but by the actual depth and quality of the milestones you complete. How drastically would that shift our collective well-being? It wouldn't just cure the time famine. Our lives would literally feel longer.
It would be a societal paradigm shift, aligning our work environments with our actual neurological needs.
Well, let's look back at the ground we've covered today. We started with a sheer panic of the holiday paradox, that creeping dread that our adult lives are just accelerating into a giant blur. We looked under the hood of the brain at the insula and the hippocampus and realized that our perception of time is entirely built on memory density.
And we learned that predictable routine is the absolute enemy of a long-feeling life.
We examined the modern forces driving our time famine, specifically how chronic phone use fractures our attention, traps us in thin time, and starves our brains of the sustained focus required to build meaningful memories.
But we also found the antidote in the science of awe. We saw how encountering vastness can physically break our internal clocks and anchor us in the present.
We explored practical, everyday tools to manufacture thick time, grounding our senses, seeking out challenging flow states, and romanticizing our mundane routines to give them emotional weight.
And finally, we scaled those principles up to our professional lives with slow productivity. We discussed the radical necessary choice to do fewer things, work at a natural pace, and obsess over quality, all protected by firm communicative boundaries.
It is deeply empowering to realize that we are not just passive victims of a ticking clock. The hardware is in our heads. We just have to learn how to operate it. So I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day.
Yeah.
If our perception of time is ultimately just a highly malleable illusion built by our memory, our emotions, and our attention, then we are literally all time travelers. We control the dial.
Wow.
What if tomorrow morning you treated your totally mundane, predictable commute to work like you were an alien visiting planet Earth for the very first time? If you pay to that level of intense, awestruck attention to the shape of the clouds, the exact shade of the sky, the faces of the strangers on the train, the sound of the city waking up, how much extra time could you create out of thin air?